So anyway, I wanted to give you the video because I wanted you to see the way that I annotated the passage and then sort of turn that into an outline. I'm not going to read all my annotations to you, especially since you should have a hard copy in front of you. But you'll notice that I marked up a lot. I highlighted, I used yellow for laughing or humor. I used blue because, well, I just thought this was sort of the main idea of the passage, the blue, and that's the color I picked to highlight it. The purple here is highlighted. This is when Bromden talks about being above the water and sort of seeing himself as a bird flying over the men, and that was a really important moment for him. So I just picked a different color because I wanted to just sort of emphasize that that was important. And then the same thing with the green. That's when the laughter is ringing out on the water in big circles until it crashes onto the coast. And I guess I just colored it that because I thought it was important. Not really anything in particular. There's not really all that much of a science to it other than I wanted to stand out and I wanted to stand apart from the other colors, so I picked a third color. And then I did a lot of marginal comments. You'll see there's a lot of them in here that I did not address necessarily in my outline. That's because when I annotate, I'm just sort of marking up everything I see. There's really no rhyme or reason. It's just stuff that I notice. And then once I'm done with my annotations, I'm able to sort of look at them and process and pull out one or two things that I want to talk about in my commentary. You're really not going to have much more time than like 2 topics because you really can only talk for 12 minutes. If you're like me, you could just go on and on and on and babble. So I'll try not to do that too much in this video because I want you to move on with your life and not be watching this all day long. So you only have 12 minutes, which I know to you sounds like a lot to talk about 40 lines. This passage is 30 lines, not 40. Thank goodness, because I don't think I can handle much more. As you can see, my outline is very long. I don't know if I'm even going to get to the sentence structure topic or not. So you should know that when you do your IOC, you might come across something and you might have some great analysis that you just might not get to. And you shouldn't be upset about that because the awesome thing is that you saw stuff and you read something new in the passage and you know, you learned from the assessment. You want to remember that, sorry, I'm just turning these off to give myself a little more space on the screen. You want to remember that these assessments are assessment for learning. So even though I'm trying to see your analysis skills and I want to see how you understand the passage and all of that, you should know that you might look at the passage that you get for your IOC and notice something that you never noticed before. And no matter what happens and what grade you get or what you say about that, that is a success because the whole point is that every time you look back at the text, you see something new and start to really learn about the depth that you can find in written text. Okay, so I'm going to get started because, like I said, most passages will be closer to 40 lines. You will have 2 guiding questions. You have a content question and a technique question. So your content question will generally relate to sort of a major theme or an overarching idea in either the passage or the work as a whole, although you do want to focus just on the passage when you do your commentary. If you need to, like I said here, very brief background, only what's relevant. I'll relate to larger themes in the novel as I go through, but only when it's relevant. I'm not summarizing the whole novel. So please be careful about that. One time someone did their whole IOC on Hamlet and basically just summarized the whole entire play and referred to the actual passage like once for about 30 seconds. So that was a little bit rough. And then you have your technique question, which will try to focus your attention to some of the literary devices in the scene. So here I was asking about the sentence structure in this passage because the sentence structure, in my opinion, in my interpretation, is pretty significant and there's, I think, a lot going on, which you'll hear about. No spoilers. I don't want to spoil my fabulous commentary for you. So what I want you to do as I commentate or comment, whatever the verb may be, you have the rubric in front of you. So I want you to keep in mind that you will be scoring me when this is over. And so you want to be able to give me some feedback and some comments as well. Look for my knowledge of the text. Look for my understanding of not only understanding of what literary techniques and devices are there, but also my understanding of how they're used and how they create meaning. So do I do a good job of addressing the effect of the literary techniques? That's really the important part of the analysis. Look for my organization. I'll admit right now that's something that I struggle with. I'll probably get rambly, even though I have my outline. Hopefully this will help me a little bit. And also look for my use of language. Is my grammar good? Do I sound well spoken? Am I using a formal tone? And am I using literary terms? That's something people forget. A lot of times they'll skirt around the issue. They'll be like, oh, there's a reference to a heart, and a heart can sometimes mean love. Well, you should say it is a symbol of love. So if you can get your lit terms in there naturally and effectively, that is a really good thing. All right, I'm going to start. I have a timer on my phone for 12 minutes. It's a countdown because you don't want to speak any longer than 12 minutes. After 12 minutes, I would interrupt you, and because I need to save about 3 minutes for questions. The point of my questions is to help you out. I'm not there as an adversary or like someone who's hoping you fail. I'm there as your coach. I'm there as your guide. I'm supposed to see something that you're on the brink of and notice some analysis that you're close to, and I'm supposed to help get you to a deeper level of thinking. So don't look at the questions as something that should make you really nervous. Although I have asked questions in the past that have thrown people off and they couldn't answer. I didn't do that on purpose. I thought I was asking an easy question. So, you know, whatever, it is what it is, right? It's only 15 minutes of your life. Okay, so is this recording? Okay. Hello, my name is Michelle Lampinen, and this is my individual oral commentary for IB Language and Literature, HL, exam session May 2014. Today I'm going to be speaking about an extract from Ken Kesey's One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. This novel was written in America. It's an American novel written in the 1960s, right around the time where the counterculture movement was becoming extremely prominent in American society, and many people, especially young people, were fighting for their individual freedoms, especially regarding freedom of thinking, freedom of thought, and freedom of expression. And they're sort of fighting against the traditions, the social customs of the time. So the novel is sort of exemplifies that, and it is based on some of Kesey's experiences as an orderly in a mental health facility in Oregon, and as well as his experience with his encounters with the law and his desire to be a free thinker. The extract occurs when the men from the ward in the novel, because most of the novel takes place in a mental health facility. This particular extract is not in that mental health facility. It's when the men were on a fishing trip. Things are starting to go awry. You can see in the first paragraph of the extract, there's lots of chaos going on. There's all sorts of disorder. And the patients are starting to get a little bit upset by the whole situation. Things change when McMurphy, who is the hero and the Christ figure of the novel, begins to laugh, and that's once he laughs, the scene represents a big turning point for the men. It's a really important scene because they realize that despite the Combine's attempt to control the men on the ward, they can take control and be their own men. And that's really important because it ties into the whole idea, like I said, Kesey's view that people should question authority and be able to think for themselves. In the past, the men were oppressed by society, I guess you could say, and sort of held down from being who they were because of the societal pressure that was placed upon them. So one of the ways that Kesey illustrates the importance of individual freedom is by developing the motif of laughter throughout the passage. The words laugh and humor, you can find them on lines 10, 11, 14, 18, 19, 24, 28. It has to be important if it shows up that much throughout this entire passage. It is one of the main focuses of the passage, the fact that McMurphy begins to laugh, and then as a result, the laughter spreads to the men. Where did my outline go? Okay. The laughter spreads throughout the men and begins to almost take on a life of its own. It's important, first of all, because it's also the first thing that McMurphy did when he arrived on the ward in the beginning of the novel, is that he laughed really loudly and boisterously, and Bromden thought that was kind of odd because he hadn't heard a real laugh in years. So that was something that he noticed in the beginning of the novel, which I guess you could say foreshadows this particular scene. In the scene itself, Kesey juxtaposes the ideas of laughter and pain. The whole passage starts off when everything is just a disaster. You can see in the first paragraph there's men yammering and cussing, and they're trying to get their fishing poles, and the woman is bleeding, and the doctor's glasses are tangled and dangled, and the fish are hitting into the boat, and George takes his eyes, he's supposed to be steering, and he runs the boat into a log. So all these things are going wrong at once. And that's when the laughter begins. Line 14, well, first McMurphy laughs, and then in line 14, you find out the reason that he laughs is because he knows you have to laugh at the things that hurt you just to keep yourself in balance, just to keep the world from running you plumb crazy. It's a little bit of an ironic line. First of all, Kesey's being pretty ironic here because the patients in the whole novel, they're in a mental institution. According to society, they are quote-unquote crazy. And here we are saying the laughter is what keeps them from being crazy. So that's one of the reasons that it is so freeing for them, because it's something that they realize they have their own control over, and they're able to, nobody can take away their laugh. And is saving the men here, which is totally fitting considering that as a Christ image throughout the novel, McMurphy is sort of a savior, and he is the one who comes in and changes everything for the men and makes things better for them. So that's even reflected in the passage. As he's laughing, all the men continue to laugh with him, and you can see in line 28 or so, this is when Bromden is looking down, according to him, looking down on the men. He can see McMurphy surrounded by his dozen people. And so McMurphy has these disciples that are depicted in the scene. So that kind of ties in as well. So the fact that he's laughing, it's like he's almost giving them permission to do so because they're his followers and they're his disciples, and he's spreading this word or this laughter to them. And also the same thing here when the just to speak of the laughter, it spreads out along the sea in waves in these ever widening circles. So what McMurphy is doing is spreading out and passing and taking on a life of its own in this passage. And it's an important moment for the men because it is the impetus that inspires them to take control of their own lives throughout the rest of the novel. In this case, the laughter is a metaphor for freedom. I think I might have said before that no one could take away someone's right to laugh. McMurphy reminds the men of that. Line 17 notes that McMurphy won't let the pain blot out the humor anymore, and he'll let the humor blot out the pain. Kind of ties into the idea of the juxtaposition of this laughter and pain. There's a lot of conflict in this novel, and there's the antithesis of Big Nurse and McMurphy, and society, and in the individual. So this humor and pain is another way to develop that theme of conflict, or the motif of conflict, rather. And also the fact that McMurphy has control over his own laughter. He says he wouldn't let the pain blot out the humor any more than he'd let the humor blot out the pain. So he's the one controlling his reaction to his situation, not anybody else but McMurphy. As I said before, as a result, once McMurphy begins to start this trend of laughing, it becomes, Kesey personifies the laughter, and it begins to take on a life of its own. In line 23, Kesey writes, "It started slow and pumped itself full, swelling the men bigger and bigger." So the laughing itself is almost like pumping itself into the men, which is causing them to grow larger, which is important because why is that important? The same thing is happening. Well, anyway, it's having the men grow larger, and that's really important because as their confidence builds, they feel themselves getting larger. Metaphorically speaking, of course, they're not literally growing larger, but they see themselves as having a larger presence, which is extremely significant. So that's one thing. As the men transform as a result of this laughter, so does Kesey's sentence structure. The extract begins with a one-sentence paragraph. That the lines that I mentioned before with all the chaos from lines 1 to 9, that's all one long sentence. You see the scramble of action holds on for a space. In a second, there was the sea, the men yammering and struggling, on and on and on, one big long run-on sentence. And that kind of mirrors the chaos and confusion that's happening on the boat during the fishing trip. Everything's happening at once. The trip is totally becoming a disaster, and no one could really take any control. And then there's this sudden shift in line 10, while McMurphy laughs. And that's it. That's the whole sentence, while McMurphy laughs. It's a huge change from the previous paragraph. And that makes sense considering the fact that the laughing is something that almost like stops the action. There's all this chaos, and in the midst of it, when all the patients are freaking out and getting upset, McMurphy just starts to laugh. It almost doesn't fit. And because it doesn't fit, as evidenced by the drastic change in sentence structure, that's sort of what initiates this change. Another reason that is significant, first of all, like I said, the fact that it is just so different, it also is almost a physical separation of McMurphy and the rest of the men. So in the first paragraph, in that big run-on sentence, everything is going on, and then there's just McMurphy laughing while McMurphy laughs. So it's almost a physical separation through Kesey's paragraph structure that kind of highlights the fact that McMurphy is that special savior, that Christ image, and he does stand apart from other men. He's not the same as they are. And that's important. So it makes sense that Kesey separates that sentence from the other paragraph, and that's where he breaks that particular paragraph. And it also, because that line is so short, it brings the disorder to a halt as well. The paragraph itself, or the sentences themselves, become very halted. And as a result, sort of everyone stops and looks at McMurphy. So that makes sense. As the characters transform, so does the sentence structure throughout the rest of the passage as well. Line 19 begins a series of sentence fragments. Starts off with a complete sentence. I notice Harding has collapsed besides McMurphy and is laughing too. So now this laughter is spreading throughout the men. And Scanlon from the bottom of the boat, at themselves as well as the rest of us. And the girl with her eyes smarting as she looks from her white breast to her red one. That's a typo. Red one. As she starts laughing. And Seafelt and the doctor and all. So it's almost like, and this one, and that one, and this one, and that one. It's like one by one, these men are being transformed right before Bromden's very eyes. So he sees each one of them individually changing and beginning to laugh. And so they're each being affected by McMurphy in their own different ways. And then the last paragraph continues that the mirroring of the emotion in the passage, or the action based on the sentence structure, because the momentum picks up again and the sentences become longer and more smooth again. If you look at the last line, that rang out on the water in ever-widening circles, farther and farther, until it crashed up on the beaches all over the coast, on beaches all over the coast, in wave after wave after wave. So there's that repetition there. It creates a sort of cadence. Almost, the sentence itself almost sounds like this wave. It almost sounds like something that's extending further and further and has some sort of repetitious sound to it, and the rhythm of that sentence mirrors the momentum that is being that's beginning in the men in the passage. That's my 12-minute warning. I'm going to sum up. So in summary, Kesey uses the scene as a climax of the novel, at least the climax of part 3, maybe not the climax of the entire novel, but as we know, this novel doesn't quite follow the traditional story arc that you might see in many other traditional novels, which also ties into the whole counterculture idea, but that's another story. His use of laughter to represent every individual's basic freedom serves to support the novel's main argument that every person should be in control of his or her own life. And this is an important scene because it does show the beginning of the control that the men are finally beginning. That's repetitive. It shows the beginning of the control that the men are finally getting over their own lives. And that is a really important message overall in the novel. Thank you very much.